Chapter 1. The Glint of Silver. The rain had ceased, leaving the cobblestones of Ashford Manor glistening under the pale glow of a November moon. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes clicking with precision, stepped from the chauffeured car and adjusted his immaculate moustache. The invitation to Lord Reginald Ashford's dinner party had intrigued him, not for its promise of fine cuisine, though that was assured, but for the undercurrent of urgency in the letter's wording. A matter of some delicacy, Lord Ashford had written, and Poirot, ever attuned to the nuances of human behaviour, sensed more than a mere social gathering awaited. The manor loomed before him, its ivy-clad walls and towering chimneys a testament to old wealth. Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend, emerged from the car behind him, muttering about the damp chill. "Quite the place, eh, Poirot? Looks like something out of a Gothic novel." "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his green eyes scanning the facade. "It is not the stones that tell the story, but the people within. Observe, and we shall see what secrets this manor holds." A butler, stiff as a sentinel, ushered them into a grand hall where crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. The air carried the scent of beeswax and roses, mingling with the faint tang of cigar smoke. Guests milled about, their laughter and clinking glasses creating a veneer of festivity. Poirot's gaze darted from face to face, cataloguing details. The forced smile of a young woman in emerald silk, the restless fingers of a man in a tailored suit, the guarded posture of an elderly matron clutching a pearl-encrusted fan. Lord Reginald Ashford, a robust man with silver hair and a commanding presence, greeted Poirot warmly. "Monsieur Poirot, your presence honours us. I trust the journey was pleasant." "Most satisfactory, Lord Ashford," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "And your home, it is magnifique. But tell me, this delicacy you mentioned, perhaps it is not only the claret that brings such a gathering?" Lord Ashford's smile faltered, but before he could respond, a bell chimed, summoning guests to the dining room. The table was a spectacle: silver candelabras, fine porcelain, and a centrepiece of orchids. Poirot was seated between Lady Beatrice Harrow, a statuesque beauty with a penchant for witty repartee, and Charles Ashford, the host's son, whose sharp eyes betrayed a restless ambition. Across the table, Eleanor Ashford, Lord Ashford's daughter, toyed with her napkin, her delicate features clouded with unease. Other guests included Mr. Julian Harrow, Lady Beatrice's aloof husband, and Mrs. Clara Winthrop, an elderly aunt with a penchant for cryptic remarks. The meal progressed with exquisite courses: consommé, roasted pheasant, a delicate soufflé. But Poirot's attention was on the guests. Lady Beatrice's laughter rang a touch too bright when Charles whispered to her. "Mr. Harrow's fork paused mid-air as he overheard." Eleanor's gaze flickered toward the door, as if expecting an uninvited guest. Poirot, sipping his wine, noted these details, his mind a ledger of human subtleties. As dessert was served, Lord Ashford rose, tapping his glass. "My friends, tonight we celebrate not only good company, but a family treasure." He gestured to a footman who carried a velvet-lined tray bearing a silver cigarette case, its surface engraved with intricate filigree. "This case, a gift from a Russian prince to my grandfather, is a symbol of Ashford resilience. It resides in my study, under lock and key, a reminder of our legacy." The guests murmured appreciation, but Poirot's eyes narrowed. The case gleamed, its craftsmanship undeniable, yet something in Lord Ashford's tone, a tremor of pride or fear, caught his attention. The tray was returned to the study, and conversation resumed, but Poirot sensed a shift in the room's atmosphere, like a breeze before a storm. An hour later, as coffee was served in the drawing room, a commotion erupted. The butler, his face ashen, approached Lord Ashford and whispered urgently. The host's expression darkened, and he excused himself, beckoning Poirot to follow. Hastings, ever curious, trailed behind. In the study, a mahogany-panelled room lined with books and portraits, the display cabinet stood open. The silver cigarette case was gone. "Impossible!" Lord Ashford exclaimed, his voice tight. "The cabinet was locked, the key in my possession. No one entered this room after dinner." Poirot knelt before the cabinet, his gloved fingers tracing the lock. "No signs of force," he murmured. "The thief, he is clever, n'est-ce pas? But Hercule Poirot, he is more so." He rose, his eyes sweeping the room. A half-open window, a faint smudge on the sill, a single cigarette stub on the rug. "Tell me, Lord Ashford, who among your guests knew of the case's value?" "All of them," Ashford admitted. "It's no secret, but they're trusted friends, family. Surely none would—" "Trust, mon ami, is a luxury the detective cannot afford," Poirot interrupted. "I will need to speak with each guest, and your staff. The little grey cells, they are already at work." Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, whispered, "Think it's a simple theft, Poirot? Or something deeper?" Poirot's moustache twitched. A simple theft does not carry such weight in the air. This case, it is more than silver. It holds a secret, and I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover it. As they returned to the drawing room, the guests' faces betrayed a spectrum of emotions: shock, curiosity, fear. Eleanor's hands trembled as she clutched her coffee cup. Charles's jaw tightened. Lady Beatrice's smile was a mask. Poirot addressed the room, his voice calm but commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, a crime has been committed. The silver cigarette case is stolen. I ask for your cooperation, for none shall leave until the truth is revealed." A murmur of protest rose, but Poirot's gaze silenced it. He turned to Hastings. "Observe, my friend, the thief is among us, and already they betray themselves with the language of the body. We begin tonight." The chapter closed with Poirot standing by the fire, his silhouette sharp against the flickering light, his mind already weaving the threads of a mystery that promised to unravel the secrets of Ashford Manor. Chapter 2. Shadows in the Study. The study of Ashford Manor was a sanctuary of oak and leather, its walls lined with books that whispered of generations past. Hercule Poirot stood at its centre, his small frame commanding the room as he surveyed the scene of the crime. The open display cabinet, its glass door glinting in the lamplight, mocked the notion of security. The silver cigarette case, that exquisite relic of Ashford legacy, was gone, and Poirot's green eyes gleamed with the challenge it presented. Captain Hastings hovered near the door, his curiosity barely contained, while Lord Ashford paced, his brow furrowed with indignation. "Mon ami," Poirot said to Hastings, his voice a velvet murmur, "observe the room. It speaks if one listens with the little grey cells." He approached the cabinet, his gloved fingers tracing the lock. A faint scratch, barely visible, marred its brass surface. "Curieux," he muttered, "no force, yet a mark. The thief, he is precise, but not infallible." Lord Ashford halted, his voice sharp. "Monsieur Poirot, the cabinet was locked, the key in my pocket all evening. No one could have opened it without breaking the glass." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And yet, the glass is intact and the case is gone. We must consider, Lord Ashford, that the impossible is merely the improbable in disguise." He turned to the butler, Mr. Grayson, who stood rigidly by the desk, his face a mask of professional calm. "You, Monsieur Grayson, you were responsible for the cabinet security, oui?" Grayson, a man of middle years with greying temples, nodded. "Yes, sir. I checked the lock myself before the guests arrived. It was secure, and the key remained with his lordship." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you saw no one enter this room during the dinner?" "No, sir," Grayson replied, though his fingers twitched slightly. A detail Poirot noted. "The study was off limits. I was stationed in the hall, ensuring no one strayed from the dining room." "Yet someone did stray," Poirot said softly. He knelt, inspecting the rug beneath the cabinet. A faint smudge of dirt, barely discernible, caught his eye. "This dirt, it is not from the polished shoes of your guests, Lord Ashford. It suggests an intruder, perhaps from the gardens." He rose, his gaze drifting to the half-open window, where the curtains stirred in the night breeze. Hastings, peering over Poirot's shoulder, ventured, "Could someone have climbed in? The window's low enough." "Possible, Hastings, but unlikely without noise," Poirot replied. "The gravel path outside would betray footsteps, and yet Monsieur Grayson heard nothing. We must look closer." He moved to the desk, its surface cluttered with papers, a crystal inkwell, and a small bronze statue of a horse. His fingers paused over a folded sheet of paper, tucked beneath a blotter. "Qu'est-ce que c'est?" he murmured, unfolding it. The note, written in a hurried scrawl, read, "The silver holds more than smoke. Midnight, the oak grove. No signature, no date." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "This, mes amis, is a clue most intriguing. It suggests the cigarette case is not merely a trinket, but a key to something greater." Lord Ashford frowned, peering at the note. "That's not my handwriting, nor anyone's I recognize. What does it mean, Monsieur Poirot?" "It means," Poirot said, "that the theft was no impulse. It was planned, and the motive lies beyond simple greed." He slipped the note into his pocket, his mind already racing. "Tell me, Lord Ashford, who has access to this study?" "Only myself, Grayson, and occasionally my children, Charles and Eleanor, for private matters," Ashford replied. "But they couldn't do this." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "In a crime, Lord Ashford, we assume nothing. I must speak with your children." He turned to Grayson. "And you, monsieur, you will remain available. The truth, it hides in the details you have not yet shared." Grayson's composure flickered, but he nodded. Poirot's attention shifted to the family dynamics, sensing tension beneath the manor's polished surface. He requested Charles and Eleanor be summoned. And soon the study door opened to admit the Ashford siblings. Charles, a tall man in his 30s, with sharp features and a restless energy, entered first, his hands thrust into his pockets. Eleanor followed, her delicate frame swathed in a shawl, her eyes darting nervously. "Monsieur Poirot," Charles said, his tone clipped, "this is absurd. A thief broke in, clearly. Why interrogate us?" Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Monsieur Charles. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It requires time to breathe. Tell me, where were you during the dinner when the case was shown?" Charles shrugged. "At the table, like everyone else. I stepped out briefly to take a call in the hall. Business, you understand." "And you, Mademoiselle Eleanor?" Poirot's voice softened, but his gaze was piercing. Eleanor hesitated, twisting her shawl. "I was unwell. I excused myself to the powder room for a few minutes, but I didn't come here." Poirot noted the tremor in her voice, the way Charles's eyes flicked toward her. "And neither of you saw anyone near the study?" Both shook their heads, but Poirot's instincts hummed. Charles's casual demeanour felt rehearsed. Eleanor's nervousness suggested fear, not utter guilt. He dismissed them politely, turning Joan of Arc style, but his mind was already piecing together the puzzle. As the siblings left, Hastings whispered, "What do you make of them, Poirot?" "Charles seems a bit too cavalier, and Eleanor's hiding something." "Précisément, Hastings," Poirot replied. "The family, they are a tapestry of secrets. The note, the scratch, the dirt, these are threads we must weave together. Tomorrow we explore the oak grove at midnight's echo, and we question further, for now. The shadows in this study have spoken. The game, it has begun." Poirot stood by the window, the night air cool against his face, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The silver cigarette case was more than a stolen heirloom. It was a cipher, and he, Hercule Poirot, would crack its code. Chapter 3. The Lady's Secret. The morning mist clung to Ashford Manor's gardens, veiling the rose beds and shrouding the ancient oaks in a spectral haze. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored coat despite the damp, stood by a window in the Manor's morning room, his sharp green eyes fixed on Eleanor Ashford. She sat on a velvet settee, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief, her pale face betraying a sleepless night. Captain Hastings, ever the loyal shadow, lingered by the fireplace, pretending to study a porcelain vase, but listening intently. Poirot had requested this private interview after observing Eleanor's unease in the study the previous night, convinced her nervousness held a key to the mystery of the stolen silver cigarette case. "Mademoiselle Eleanor," Poirot began, his voice smooth as polished oak, "you are troubled, n'est-ce pas? The theft of your father's heirloom. It weighs heavily, but there is something more, something personal, I think." Eleanor's eyes flicked up, wide and startled, like a deer caught in a hunter's sight. "I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. I'm just upset about the theft, like everyone else." Poirot's moustache curved slightly, a smile that was both gentle and unrelenting. "Non, mademoiselle. The eyes, they do not lie, even when the lips try. Last night in the study, you were not merely upset. You were afraid. Tell me, what is it that haunts you?" She hesitated, her gaze darting to the window, as if expecting an eavesdropper. The room, with its heavy drapes and ticking grandfather clock, seemed to close in, amplifying the silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. It's about a man I saw 3 days ago in the village. He was watching me, Monsieur Poirot. I didn't know him, but he knew my name. He said something strange about the cigarette case." Poirot leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Précisément, mademoiselle. What did this man say, and what was his appearance?" Eleanor swallowed, her fingers tightening on the handkerchief. "He was tall, with a scar on his left cheek, and he wore a dark coat, like he didn't belong in our quiet village. He approached me outside the post office and said, 'The silver case will bring trouble to your family, Miss Ashford. You'd do well to let it go.' I was frightened and ran home. I didn't tell father. He'd think I was being silly." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Silly? No, mademoiselle, this is most significant. This stranger, he knew of the case's importance. Did he say anything else? A name, perhaps, or a reason for his warning?" She shook her head, her auburn curls trembling. "No, he vanished when I looked back. But I've felt watched ever since, as if someone's waiting for something to happen." Hastings, unable to contain himself, interjected, "Good heavens, Poirot, this sounds like a threat. Could this fellow be the thief?" Poirot raised a hand, silencing his friend. "Patience, Hastings. The mind, it must not leap to conclusions. Mademoiselle, you have done well to tell me this. Now, Let us explore further. This cigarette case, it is more than a family treasure, oui? Your father spoke of its history, but have you heard whispers of its significance? Eleanor's cheeks flushed, and she averted her eyes. There are stories, old family tales. Aunt Clara, Mrs. Winthrop, used to say the case was a gift from a Russian prince, but it came with a shadow. She's superstitious, always talking about curses and secrets. I never believed her, but after that man, I'm not so sure. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words. A shadow, you say? Most interesting. And your brother, Monsieur Charles, does he share your aunt's tales, or does he have his own reasons to value the case? Eleanor's lips parted, then closed. Charles, he's ambitious. He wants to expand father's business, but they argue constantly. He thinks the case is a symbol of outdated tradition, but I don't think he'd steal it. He's too proud. Pride, Poirot mused. It is a motive as powerful as greed. Tell me, mademoiselle, have you enemies? A family rival, perhaps, who might wish to harm the Ashfords? Her eyes widened. The Drakes, she said softly. Father's competitors in the steel trade. They've always resented our success. There was a lawsuit years ago. Father won, and they never forgave him. Could they be involved? Poirot's fingers tapped his chin. The Drakes, oui, a thread to follow. You have given me much to ponder, mademoiselle. Rest assured, Hercule Poirot will protect your confidence and uncover the truth. As Eleanor rose to leave, her shawl slipped, revealing a small bruise on her wrist. Poirot's gaze lingered, but he said nothing, merely bowing as she exited. Once alone, Hastings turned to him. What do you make of it, Poirot? That stranger sounds like bad news. And that bruise. Do you think someone's threatening her? Poirot paced, his steps precise. The bruise, it is curious, but we must not assume. The stranger, however, is a piece of the puzzle. His warning suggests the cigarette case holds a secret worth stealing or killing for. The Drakes, too, they are a shadow in this affair. We must learn more of this rival family and their grudge. He paused by the window, gazing at the mist-shrouded gardens. Eleanor, she is afraid, but not only of the stranger. There is a secret she guards, perhaps even from herself. The note from the study. The silver holds more than smoke. It aligns with her tale. We must investigate this oak grove mentioned in the note, and we must watch Mademoiselle Eleanor closely. Hastings frowned. You think she's hiding something more? Always, mon ami, Poirot replied, his voice low. In a house of secrets, everyone hides something. But fear not, the little grey cells, they are at work, and the truth, it will not escape Hercule Poirot. The morning room grew quiet, the clocks ticking a steady pulse as Poirot's mind wove connections. A scarred stranger, a rival family, a cryptic note, and a frightened young woman. The theft of the silver cigarette case was no simple crime. It was a thread in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. Chapter 4. A Game of Cards and Lies. The drawing-room of Ashford Manor glowed with the soft flicker of a chandelier, its crystal prisms casting delicate shadows on the damask wallpaper. Hercule Poirot stood near a rosewood card table, his gloved fingers tracing the green baize, where, on the night of the theft, the guests had played a spirited game of bridge. The silver cigarette case had vanished shortly after, and Poirot, with his unerring instinct for human nature, suspected the game held more than tricks and trumps. Captain Hastings sat nearby, flipping through a guest list, his brow furrowed with curiosity. Mon ami, Poirot said, his voice a quiet melody. A card game. It is a microcosm of life. strategy, deception, alliances. Last night, while the guests played, the thief moved. We must reconstruct the scene to find the truth." Hastings nodded, glancing at the table. "Right, Poirot. Lord Ashford said the game started after the case was shown and ended just before the theft was discovered. Everyone was accounted for, weren't they?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Accounted for, perhaps, but not truthful. The little grey cells, they sense discrepancies. Let us begin with the players." He had requested interviews with the key participants: Lady Beatrice Harrow, her husband Mr. Julian Harrow, Charles Ashford, and Mrs. Clara Winthrop. The butler Grayson had confirmed the four were at the card table, joined briefly by Eleanor, who left early, claiming a headache. Lady Beatrice entered first, her sapphire gown shimmering as she settled into a chair with the grace of a practiced performer. Her smile was dazzling, but Poirot noted the faint tightness around her eyes. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice a honeyed drawl, "this business with the cigarette case is dreadful. But surely a card game can't solve a theft." "Madame," Poirot replied, his gaze piercing, "every detail is a thread in the tapestry of truth. Tell me, during the game, where were you seated, and what did you observe?" Beatrice tilted her head, her fingers brushing a diamond earring. "I was partnered with Charles, facing Mr. Harrow and Mrs. Winthrop. It was a lively game. Charles is quite the strategist, you know. I didn't notice anything unusual, though Eleanor seemed out of sorts when she left." Poirot leaned forward. "And you, madame, you remained at the table throughout." "Of course," she said, her smile unwavering. "I adore bridge. I wouldn't miss a hand." Poirot's eyes lingered on her, noting the quick flutter of her lashes. "Merci, madame. You may go, but we will speak again." As she rose, her scarf brushed the table, revealing a faint smudge of ash on the baize. Poirot's fingers paused over it, his mind clicking like a metronome. Next came Mr. Julian Harrow, a lean man with a perpetually bored expression. His tailored suit spoke of wealth, but his cold eyes suggested detachment. "Monsieur Harrow," Poirot began, "you played opposite your wife. Did you notice anyone leave the table, perhaps to visit the study?" Harrow's lips thinned. "I was focused on the cards, not the room. Charles stepped out once, said he had a call. Eleanor left early, as you know. Otherwise, we were all there. This is a waste of time, Poirot. The thief came through the window, obviously." "Obviously?" Poirot's tone was mild, but his gaze was sharp. "The window, it is a theory, but the facts, they must align. Did you see anything unusual? Perhaps a gesture, a look that struck you?" Harrow shrugged. Beatrice was flirting with Charles as usual, annoying but harmless. Mrs. Winthrop kept muttering about luck and curses. "Silly old bat, that's all." Poirot nodded, dismissing him but noting the bitterness in his tone. "A man who sees his wife's flirtations but does not act," he murmured to Hastings. "He's either indifferent or calculating. We shall see." Charles Ashford was next, his restless energy filling the room. "Monsieur Poirot, this is ridiculous," he said, pacing. "I was playing cards, not stealing father's precious case. I left for a phone call. 5 minutes, tops. Grayson saw me in the hall." "Indeed," Poirot said, his voice calm. "And during this call, you saw no one near the study?" "No," Charles snapped, then hesitated. "Well, I saw Grayson, but he was at his post. Look, I don't care about that case. It's just a relic holding us back." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A relic, you say? Yet it is valuable enough to steal. Merci, Monsieur Charles." As Charles left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "His impatience, it hides something, and his call. Too convenient, no?" Finally, Mrs. Clara Winthrop. Lord Ashford's elderly aunt, shuffled in, her cane tapping the floor. Her sharp eyes belied her frail appearance. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice quavering, "that case is cursed. I told Reginald to sell it years ago. It brings nothing but trouble." "Cursed, madam?" Poirot's tone was polite but probing. "What do you recall of the game?" She squinted, as if peering into the past. "I was losing, as usual. Beatrice was too busy charming Charles to play well. Julian was distracted, watching them. Eleanor left early, pale as a ghost. I saw nothing else. My eyes aren't what they were." Poirot smiled. "Your eyes, madame, see more than you claim." "Merci." As she departed, he bent over the card table, retrieving a cigarette stub from beneath it, its tip stained with a faint trace of lipstick. "Hastings, regardez! This stub, it was not here last night. Someone was careless." Hastings leaned in. "Lipstick! Could it be Lady Beatrice's?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, slipping the stub into a small envelope. "But the colour? It is not quite her shade." The game of cards, it was a stage for lies. Beatrice claims she never left, yet her scarf carries ash. Harrow's jealousy simmers. Charles's absence is too neat, and Mrs. Winthrop sees more than she admits. The stub, it points to a woman, or someone clever enough to make us think so. He paced, his mind a whirl of connections. The note from the study, the stranger Eleanor saw, this stub, they are pieces of a puzzle. The card game, it was the thief's curtain, hiding their movements. We must dig deeper, Hastings, into the hearts of these players. The drawing room grew quiet, the chandelier's light casting long shadows. Poirot stood, his silhouette sharp, his little grey cells weaving a net to catch a liar. Chapter 5. The Gardener's Tale. The gardens of Ashford Manor lay cloaked in a morning mist that curled like ghostly fingers around the ancient yews and rose bushes. Hercule Poirot, his polished shoes dampened by the dew, navigated the gravel paths with deliberate steps, his overcoat buttoned against the autumn chill. The Gothic splendour of the manor loomed behind him, its windows glinting like watchful eyes. Captain Hastings trailed at his side, rubbing his hands for warmth, his breath visible in the crisp air. They were on their way to question old Tom, the manor's groundskeeper, whose claim of seeing a shadowy figure near the study window on the night of the silver cigarette case's theft had piqued Poirot's interest. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the silence. "The gardens, they are not merely a backdrop. They hold secrets, just as the manor does. This old Tom, he sees more than he tells, I wager." His green eyes scanned the landscape, noting the orderly flower beds and the gnarled oak grove in the distance, mentioned in the cryptic note from the study. Hastings shivered, glancing at the mist-shrouded trees. "Rather eerie out here, Poirot. Do you think Tom's story holds water? A figure by the window could be our thief." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Perhaps, Hastings, but the truth, it is like a rose. Beautiful, but with thorns. We must handle it carefully." They found old Tom near a tool shed, his weathered hands pruning a hedge with a pair of shears. He was a stooped figure, his face etched with lines like the bark of the oaks he tended, his eyes wary beneath a battered cap. "Mornin', gentlemen," he said, his voice gruff. "Heard you're poking about that stolen case. I don't know much, mind." Poirot smiled, his manner disarming. "Monsieur Tom, your modesty, it is charming, but unnecessary. You told Lord Ashford you saw a figure by the study window on the night of the theft. Tell me, what precisely did you see?" Tom's shears paused, and he glanced toward the manor as if ensuring they were alone. "Was late, after the dinner started. I was checking the grounds. Fox's been at the roses, see. saw a shadow by the study window, moving quick-like. Couldn't see a face, just a dark shape, tallish. Then it was gone, into the trees. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A shadow, you say? Male or female, could you tell? And this movement, it was toward the oak grove, perhaps. Tom shifted, his gaze dropping to the shears. Couldn't say if it was man or woman. Too dark, too quick. And I, toward the grove, maybe. I didn't follow. Ain't my place to chase ghosts. Ghosts, no, Poirot said softly. But thieves, perhaps. Tell me, Monsieur Tom, you have worked here many years, oui? You know the family, the guests. Did anyone act strangely that night, before or after the dinner? Tom's jaw tightened, and he resumed pruning with a vigour that betrayed unease. Folks like them, they're always strange to me. Rich folk with their secrets. I keep to my gardens. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low but firm. And yet you see much, do you not? The little grey cells, they tell me you know more than you share. Speak, monsieur, or the shadow you saw may cast suspicion on you. Tom's eyes flashed, a mix of defiance and fear. Ain't hiding nothing, but I did see Mr. Harrow, Julian Harrow, that is, out here a day before the dinner. He was talking to someone by the grove, quiet-like. Didn't see who, but it wasn't usual for him to be wandering the grounds. Poirot's fingers tapped his chin. Monsieur Harrow, outside with an unknown companion. Most interesting. And this conversation, it was heated perhaps? Didn't hear words, Tom admitted, but Harrow looked angry, gesturing like he was making a point. Then they parted quick when I got near. Hastings, unable to stay silent, interjected. Good Lord, Poirot, Harrow's hiding something. First his jealousy over Beatrice and Charles, now this secret meeting. Poirot raised a hand. Patience, Hastings. Meeting? It is a clue, not a conclusion. Monsieur Tom, one final question. This figure by the window, did it carry anything, perhaps something that gleamed, like silver? Tom shook his head. Couldn't see that much. Just a shape, like I said. I went back to my shed after that, didn't want trouble. Poirot nodded, dismissing him with a courteous bow. Merci, Monsieur Tom. Your tale, it is a seed that will grow in the garden of truth. As Tom shuffled away, Poirot knelt by the study window, examining the ground. The gravel was disturbed, a faint scuff mark suggesting a hurried step. He traced the path toward the oak grove, his eyes narrowing at a crushed leaf, its edge stained with a dark smudge. Mud, perhaps, or something more sinister. Hastings, he said. The grounds, they confirm Tom's story, but they also whisper of carelessness. The thief, they left traces. Hastings peered at the mark. You think Tom's telling the truth then? Or is he covering for someone? Poirot rose, brushing his gloves. Old Tom, he speaks truth, but not all of it. His reluctance, it suggests loyalty or fear. This connection to Monsieur Harrow, it is a thread we must pull. Harrow, with his cold demeanour and jealous heart, meets a stranger in the grove. And the figure by the window, perhaps it was this same stranger, or perhaps Harrow himself. He turned, his gaze fixed on the oak grove, its twisted branches barely visible through the mist. The note from the study, midnight, the oak grove, it beckons us. Tonight, we shall explore this place, but for now, we return to the manor. The guests, they play their parts, but the script, it is unravelling. The mist thickened as they walked back, the manor's silhouette looming like a sentinel. Poirot's mind churned, weaving Tom's tale with the cigarette stub, Eleanor's stranger, and the cryptic note. The theft of the silver cigarette case was a puzzle with many pieces, and Hercule Poirot was determined to fit them together. Chapter 6. The Locked Room Riddle. The study of Ashford Manor was a fortress of shadows, its oak-panelled walls absorbing the dim light of a single desk lamp. Hercule Poirot stood before the open display cabinet. Its glass door had silent witness to the theft of the silver cigarette case. The lock, unforced yet scratched, mocked the notion of security. Captain Hastings, perched on the edge of a leather armchair, watched Poirot with a mix of admiration and impatience, his notebook open but unused. The air was heavy with the scent of old books and the faint tang of polish, a reminder of the manor's fastidious upkeep. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice precise as a metronome, "this cabinet, it is the heart of our mystery. A locked room, yet the treasure is gone. The thief, he is a magician, or so he wishes us to believe. But Hercule Poirot, he does not believe in magic, only in method." Hastings frowned, glancing at the cabinet. "It's baffling. Poirot!" Lord Ashford swore the key never left his pocket, and Grayson confirmed the lock was secure. Could it have been picked? Poirot's gloved fingers traced the faint scratch on the brass lock, his green eyes narrowing. Picked, perhaps, but with finesse. The scratch, it is superficial, a slip, not a struggle. The lock, it is a simple pin-tumbler design, vulnerable to a skilled hand. But let us test this theory. He produced a small magnifying glass from his pocket, examining the lock's interior. No residue of oil, no deep gouges. The thief knew the lock's secrets, or they had another means. He stepped back, surveying the cabinet's surroundings. The mahogany desk, the half-open window, the rug with its faint smudge of dirt from his earlier inspection. Hastings, consider the timeline. The case was shown during dinner, returned here, and stolen before the coffee hour. The window, it tempts us with the idea of an outsider, but the gravel outside would betray footsteps. No, the answer lies within these walls. Hastings scratched his head. An insider, then? But who had access? Lord Ashford, Grayson, maybe Charles or Eleanor. Could one of them have a duplicate key? Poirot's moustache twitched. A duplicate, it is possible, but too simple. Let us explore the room itself. He moved to the desk, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkwell, and a bronze horse statue. His fingers paused over a drawer, its edge slightly misaligned. "Curieux," he murmured, pulling it open. Inside lay pens, a ledger, and a small panel that seemed out of place. With a gentle press, the panel clicked, revealing a hidden compartment. Hastings leaned forward, eyes wide. "Good heavens, Poirot! A secret drawer, what's in it?" Poirot extracted a faded photograph, its edges yellowed with age. It depicted the silver cigarette case on a velvet cloth, its filigree gleaming under studio light. On the back, an inscription in elegant script read, "To the Ashfords, Guardians of the Truth, 1892. Below it, in a different hand, was a single word, vow. "The truth, it is guarded by silver," Poirot said softly, turning the photograph over. "This case, it is more than an heirloom. The date, 1892, it predates Lord Ashford's father. And this vow, it suggests a secret, perhaps a pact." Hastings peered at the photograph. A pact? You mean the case might hold something, documents maybe. But how does that help us with the theft? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "It tells us motive, mon ami. The thief did not steal for wealth alone, but for what the case represents. We must learn more of this vow." He replaced the photograph, closing the compartment with care. The cabinet, the lock, the hidden drawer, they form a riddle. Let us hypothesize. The thief entered the study, opened the cabinet without breaking it, and took the case. How? Hastings paced, thinking aloud. If not a key or picking, maybe the cabinet has a trick, like your hidden drawer. A false back, perhaps. Poirot nodded, returning to the cabinet. He tapped its wooden frame, listening for hollow sounds, then examined the interior shelves. A slight irregularity in the back panel caught his eye. With a gentle push, the panel slid aside, revealing a narrow space, empty, but large enough to conceal a small object. "Voila," he said, "a secret within a secret. But it is empty now. The thief, they knew of this, or they were fortunate." Hastings whistled. So the case was hidden there before being displayed, and the thief got to it somehow. But the lock, Poirot, how did they open it? Poirot paced, his mind a whirl of connections. Consider, Hastings. The lock was not forced, yet the scratch suggests tampering. A tool, perhaps a fine wire, manipulated the pins, or... He paused, his gaze drifting to the window. The window? It was open, but the gravel undisturbed. Perhaps it was opened from within, to mislead us. The thief, they were among the guests, moving during the card game's distraction. He knelt by the rug, re-examining the cigarette stub he had found earlier. This stub, with its hint of lipstick, it points to a woman, or someone clever enough to suggest one. The note from the study, the stranger Eleanor saw, old Tom's shadowy figure, they all converge here, in this locked room. Hastings rubbed his chin. "You're saying it's an inside job? Staged to look like an outsider? But who? Charles with his convenient phone call? Lady Beatrice with her ash-stained scarf?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "All are suspects, Hastings, until the little grey cells separate truth from deception. The photograph, it tells us the case is a key to a vow, perhaps a secret worth stealing. We must question Lord Ashford about this inscription, and search the oak grove tonight, as the note suggests." The study grew quiet, the lamp's light casting long shadows across the room. Poirot stood by the cabinet, his silhouette sharp against the glass, his mind weaving the threads of a locked room riddle into a tapestry of truth. The silver cigarette case was not just stolen. It was a prize in a game of secrets, and Hercule Poirot was determined to win. Chapter 7. Whispers of Betrayal. The conservatory of Ashford Manor was a haven of light and greenery, its glass walls framing a riot of orchids and ferns under the pale afternoon sun. Hercule Poirot sat at a wrought-iron table, his teacup untouched, his green eyes darting from guest to guest, as the clink of porcelain and murmur of conversation filled the air. The afternoon tea, ostensibly a moment of respite, crackled with unspoken tensions, and Poirot, ever the observer of human nature, sensed a storm brewing beneath the polite facade. Captain Hastings, seated beside him, stirred his tea absently, his attention fixed on the same tableau. Poirot scrutinized. "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, his voice low, "observe the dance of glances. The heart, it betrays itself, even when the lips are silent." His gaze settled on Charles Ashford, who leaned close to Lady Beatrice Harrow, their laughter a touch too intimate for the setting. Across the table, Mr. Julian Harrow's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping his saucer with unnecessary force. Eleanor Ashford, pale and withdrawn, sipped her tea in silence, while Mrs. Clara Winthrop, the elderly aunt, muttered about the weather with a sharpness that suggested she missed nothing. The theft of the silver cigarette case hung over the gathering like a shadow, and Poirot's investigation had stirred unease among the guests. His morning discoveries, the scratched lock, the hidden compartment, the cryptic photograph, had convinced him the case was more than an heirloom. Now he sought to unravel the personal motives that might have driven the theft, and the chemistry between Charles and Lady Beatrice was a thread he could not ignore. "Lady Beatrice," Poirot said, his tone courteous but probing, "you seem in high spirits today. The events of last night, they do not trouble you." Beatrice turned, her smile radiant but practised. "Monsieur Poirot, one mustn't let a little theft spoil a pleasant afternoon. Charles was just telling me about his plans for the Ashford business. Quite ambitious, aren't they, Charles?" Charles grinned, his eyes lingering on hers. "Indeed. Father's too tied to tradition, but I see a future in steel exports. The cigarette case, it's a relic, valuable, sure, but not worth this fuss." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A relic, you say, Monsieur Charles? Yet someone thought it worth stealing. Tell me, during this tea, have you noticed anything out of place?" Charles shrugged, but his gaze flickered toward Eleanor, who had spilled a drop of tea on her saucer. "Nothing, Poirot. Just a lot of nervous people, thanks to your questions." Before Poirot could press further, Mr. Harrow interjected, his voice cold. "Nervous, Charles? Or guilty? Some here seem far too comfortable, given the circumstances." His eyes locked on his wife, who met his gaze with a defiant tilt of her chin. "Julian, darling," Beatrice said, her tone light but edged, "don't be tiresome. Monsieur Poirot is handling things, aren't you?" "Précisément, madame," Poirot replied, his eyes noting the flush on Harrow's cheeks. "But I rely on the honesty of all present. For instance, madame, your scarf yesterday, it carried a trace of ash near the card table. You smoke, perhaps?" Beatrice laughed, a musical sound that rang hollow. "Occasionally, but I didn't smoke last night. Must have been someone else's ash. Cards get messy, you know." Poirot nodded, his smile enigmatic. He turned to Eleanor, whose hands trembled slightly. "Mademoiselle Eleanor, you are quiet today. The strain of the theft, it weighs on you." Eleanor started, her teacup clattering. I just want this to be over. The case. It's brought nothing but trouble." Her voice was soft, but Poirot caught the fear beneath it, recalling her tale of the scarred stranger. As the tea continued, Poirot excused himself, gesturing for Hastings to follow. "I must revisit the study, mon ami. The air here, it is thick with secrets, and I sense a clue awaits us." They slipped away, leaving the guests to their strained civility. In the study, the afternoon light filtered through the half-open window, casting long shadows across the rug. Poirot knelt by the display cabinet, his eyes scanning the floor. The cigarette stub, the smudge of dirt, they were clues, but incomplete. We must look again. His fingers brushed the base of the cabinet, pausing at a small folded cloth caught in a crack. He extracted it, a silk handkerchief, monogrammed with the initials BH. "Hastings, regardez!" Poirot held up the handkerchief, its delicate fabric stained with a faint trace of perfume. "BH? Beatrice Harrow, perhaps? Or another with those initials?" Hastings whistled. "Beatrice, she was cagey about that ash. Do you think she's the thief?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "No, Hastings, we must not leap. The handkerchief, it is a clue, but it could be planted to mislead. Beatrice, she flirts with Charles, and Harrow seethes. This triangle, it is a motive, but for theft or something deeper?" He slipped the handkerchief into an envelope, his mind racing. Returning to the conservatory, Poirot overheard a whispered exchange as he approached. Charles's voice, low and urgent, reached him. "Beatrice, we need to be careful. If Julian suspects—" He stopped as Poirot re-entered, his face smoothing into a smile. "Pardon, Monsieur Charles," Poirot said, "but I overheard a fragment. You speak of suspicion. Care to elaborate?" Charles flushed, glancing at Beatrice, who laughed lightly. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, just business talk. Charles is worried about his investors, aren't you?" "Exactly," Charles said quickly. "Nothing to do with the case." Poirot's smile was polite but unrelenting. Of course. Yet secrets, they have a way of surfacing, no? He turned to the group, his voice commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, a new clue has emerged, a handkerchief found near the scene. I urge honesty, for the truth, it will not remain hidden." The guests exchanged uneasy glances, Harrow's eyes narrowing at his wife. Eleanor's hand tightened on her cup, and Mrs. Winthrop muttered something about family disgrace. Poirot watched them all, his little grey cells weaving a net of betrayal, jealousy, and hidden motives. As the tea dispersed, Poirot murmured to Hastings, "The handkerchief, it points to Beatrice, but the whispers between her and Charles, they suggest a deeper game. We must watch this triangle, and tonight the Oak Grove awaits. The silver cigarette case, it is the key to a lock of secrets." The conservatory emptied, leaving only the scent of tea and the echo of whispers, as Poirot's mind tightened its grip on the mystery. Chapter 8. The Stranger at the Gate. The fog draped London like a tattered cloak, muffling the clatter of hooves and the distant hum of the city, as Hercule Poirot stepped from a hansom cab onto the slick cobblestones of a narrow street. The sign above the Black Raven pub swayed in the damp breeze, its creak a fitting prelude to the confrontation ahead. Captain Hastings, bundled in his overcoat, followed closely, his face a mixture of excitement and unease. Poirot's investigation into the theft of the silver cigarette case had led them here, to track down Victor Crane, the scarred stranger Eleanor Ashford had encountered in the village, whose cryptic warning about the case hinted at a deeper motive. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but clear. "This pub, it is a stage where shadows play their parts. Monsieur Crane, he knows more than he told Mademoiselle Eleanor. We must draw him out, but with care. The fox is cunning when cornered." Hastings nodded, peering through the fog at the pub's grimy windows, where dim light spilled onto the street. "You think he's our thief, Poirot? Eleanor said he had a scar, and old Tom saw a tall figure by the study. It fits." Poirot's moustache twitched. "It fits, perhaps, but the puzzle, it is not so simple. The little grey cells, they demand proof, not coincidence. Let us proceed." Inside, the Black Raven was a haze of tobacco smoke and raucous laughter, its air thick with the scent of ale and damp wool. Rough-hewn tables were crowded with dock workers and merchants, their voices a low roar. Poirot, his immaculate suit a stark contrast to the room's grit, scanned the crowd until his eyes settled on a lone figure in a corner booth. The man was tall, his dark coat worn but well cut, a scar slicing across his left cheek like a jagged signature. Victor Crane. Poirot approached, his steps measured, Hastings trailing behind. "Monsieur Crane," he said, his tone polite but unyielding, "I am Hercule Poirot, and this is Captain Hastings. We must speak of a matter concerning Ashford Manor and a certain silver cigarette case." Crane's eyes, sharp and guarded, flicked up from his glass. "Poirot, eh? Heard of you. Nosy detective, poking into other folks' business. What's this about a cigarette case?" Poirot slid into the booth, his small frame radiating authority. "Do not play the innocent, monsieur. You spoke to Mademoiselle Eleanor Ashford 3 days ago, warning her of trouble tied to the case. That very case was stolen 2 nights past. You will explain your words, or I shall conclude you are more than a bystander." Crane's scarred cheek twitched, but he leaned back, a faint smirk curling his lips. "You're a bold one. I'll give you that. All right, I'll talk. I knew Reginald Ashford years ago. Business partners we were, in steel. He betrayed me, cheated me out of my share. I lost everything, while he built his manor and his fortune. That cigarette case? It's more than a trinket. It's a symbol of his greed. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A symbol, you say? And this betrayal, it gives you motive to steal it, no? To strike at Lord Ashford's pride? Crane laughed, a harsh sound that drew glances from nearby tables. Steal it? I'm no thief, Poirot. I warned the girl because I know what that case means to the Ashfords and to others. There's bad blood tied to it, old promises broken. I told her to let it go before it brought more trouble. Hastings, unable to stay silent, leaned forward. Trouble, you say? Like what? And where were you the night it was stolen? Crane's smirk faded. I was here, drinking with 6 witnesses. Ask the barman if you don't believe me. As for the trouble, let's just say the case has history. Secrets Ashford doesn't share, even with his own kin. Poirot's fingers tapped the table, his mind cataloguing Crane's words. Secrets, monsieur. The photograph in the study, it spoke of a vow from 1892. You know of this, perhaps? Crane's eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise betraying his composure. You're thorough. I'll give you that. The vow? Old tales from before my time with Ashford. Ask his aunt, Clara Winthrop. She's got a tongue for ghost stories. But I'll tell you this. That case was a gift, and gifts like that come with strings. Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft but piercing. And these strings, they lead to the Drakes, perhaps. The Ashfords' rivals, whom Eleanor mentioned. Crane's hand tightened on his glass. You're fishing, Poirot. The Drakes hate Ashford as much as I do, but I'm not their errand boy. I said my piece to the girl and left it at that. If the case is gone, maybe it's justice catching up. Poirot studied him, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his scar seemed to pulse with suppressed anger. Justice, monsieur, is my domain. Your alibi? It will be checked. But tell me, this warning to Eleanor, was it truly concern, or a threat to unsettle the Ashfords? Crane met his gaze, unflinching. Concern, threat, call it what you like. I owed Ashford a reminder that his sins don't sleep. Now, unless you've got proof I took that case, we're done here. Poirot rose, his smile enigmatic. For now, monsieur, but Hercule Poirot, he does not forget a face or a scar. Bonsoir. He turned, gesturing for Hastings to follow, and stepped back into the foggy street. As the cab rattled back toward Ashford Manor, Hastings spoke up. What do you make of him, Poirot? He's got motive, but that alibi sounds solid. And those hints about the case's history. Do you think he's telling the truth? Poirot gazed out at the fog, his mind a whirl of connections. Crane, he is a man of bitterness, but his words, they carry truth laced with evasion. His alibi we will verify, but the case's history, this vow, it ties to the note, to Eleanor's stranger, to old Tom's shadow. The Drakes too loom in the background. Tonight we explore the oak grove, as the note commands. The silver cigarette case, it is a key, and Crane, he knows to what lock. The fog thickened, swallowing the cab as Poirot's little grey cells wove a net to catch a vengeful shadow. Chapter 9. The Heirloom's Curse. The library of Ashford Manor was a cavern of knowledge, its towering shelves laden with leather-bound tomes that seemed to absorb the flickering light of the fireplace. Hercule Poirot stood by a high-backed chair, his gloved hands clasped behind him, his green eyes fixed on Mrs. Clara Winthrop. The elderly aunt of Lord Ashford sat ensconced in a velvet armchair, her frail hands clutching a worn shawl, her sharp gaze belying her age. Captain Hastings hovered near a globe, pretending to study its contours but listening intently. Poirot had sought out Mrs. Winthrop after Victor Crane's cryptic hints about the silver cigarette case's history, convinced her knowledge of the family's past held a key to the theft. "Madame Winthrop," Poirot began, his voice smooth as polished silver, "you have spoken of the cigarette case as cursed. This intrigues me. For Hercule Poirot, he seeks the truth behind such tales. Tell me, what is this curse, and how does it relate to the case's disappearance?" Mrs. Winthrop's eyes narrowed, her lips pursing as if weighing her words. "You're a man of reason, Monsieur Poirot, but some things defy logic. That case, it's been trouble since it came to us. My father, Lord Ashford's grandfather, received it in 1892 from a Russian prince, a gift for some favour done in St. Petersburg. But it wasn't just a gift. It came with whispers, secrets, betrayals, a promise that bound our family." Poirot leaned forward, his moustache twitching. "A promise, madame. The photograph in the study, it spoke of a vow. Is this the same?" Her fingers tightened on her shawl, and she glanced at the fire, as if seeing ghosts in the flames. "You've seen the photograph, then?" "Yes, the vow. My father never spoke of it directly, but he warned us to guard the case, said it held more than silver. I was a girl then, but I overheard him once arguing with a man, a foreigner, I think, about a debt unpaid. The case was mentioned, and father was furious. After that, he locked it away, called it a curse." Hastings, unable to stay silent, interjected, "A curse, Mrs. Winthrop? Surely you don't believe in such things. Could it be someone wanted the case for its value, not some old superstition?" She turned her sharp gaze on him. "Believe what you will, Captain, but bad luck followed that case. My brother lost his fortune in '95, a year after handling it. My cousin, dead in a duel in '97, the case in his pocket. And now stolen. It's no coincidence." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind cataloguing her words. "Most interesting, madame. This vow, this debt, do you know its nature? And who might know of it today, enough to steal the case?" Mrs. Winthrop hesitated, her gaze flickering to the library door. "The Drakes," she said softly, "are rivals in the steel trade. There was a scandal, decades ago, when my father outbid them for a contract. The case was tied to it somehow, a symbol, perhaps, of their defeat. They swore revenge, and I wouldn't put it past them to strike now." Poirot nodded, recalling Eleanor's mention of the Drakes. "And this scandal, it involved documents, perhaps? Something hidden within the case?" Her eyes widened, a spark of surprise betraying her. "You're clever, Monsieur Poirot. I don't know about documents, but wait." She rose slowly, her cane tapping as she shuffled to a bookshelf. Her fingers traced a row of books, pausing at a worn volume of poetry. She pulled it out, revealing a small envelope tucked inside. "I found this years ago, hidden by my father. I kept it, thinking it might matter some day." Poirot took the envelope, his fingers deft as he opened it. Inside was a letter, its paper brittle, dated 1893. The script was formal, in a language Poirot recognized as Russian, with an English translation scrawled in the margin. "The bearer of the silver holds the truth of our pact. Guard it, or face ruin." It was signed with a single initial, V. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his mind racing. "This V, it could be Victor Crane, or another from that time. The case, it is a vessel for a secret, perhaps a proof of betrayal. Madam, you have kept this hidden. Why?" Mrs. Winthrop sank back into her chair, her face pale. "I feared stirring old wounds. The Ashfords have enemies, Monsieur Poirot. The Drakes, perhaps others. I thought if the case stayed locked away, the past would sleep." Poirot slipped the letter into his pocket, his expression unreadable. "The past, madame, it never sleeps. It whispers, and now it has spoken. This letter, it connects the case to a pact, perhaps with the Drakes or this V. We must learn more." Hastings frowned, glancing at the letter. "Poirot, do you think the case holds something tangible, like a contract? And could Crane be tied to this V?" Poirot paced, his steps precise. The case, it may indeed conceal a compartment, as the study's hidden drawer suggested. As for Crane, his initials match, but the letter is too old. He would have been a boy in 1893. No, this V is another, perhaps his father, or an associate. The Drakes, they loom large, their grudge a motive. But we must also consider the manor, Charles, Beatrice, Harrow, their secrets intertwine with this history. He turned to Mrs. Winthrop. "Madame, one final question. This curse, you believe it, yet you stayed silent when the case was stolen. Why?" Her eyes clouded, and she clutched her shawl. "I feared the truth would destroy us. The case, it's a chain binding us to a mistake. I hoped its theft would end the curse, but now I see it's only begun." Poirot bowed, his voice gentle but firm. "Merci, madame. Your tale, it is a lantern in the fog. Rest assured, Hercule Poirot will find the truth, curse or no." As they left the library, Hastings whispered, "What do you make of it, Poirot?" "A curse, a Russian pact, the Drakes, it's like a novel." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A novel, perhaps, but with real stakes. The letter, it confirms the case's importance. Tonight, the Oak Grove awaits, as the note commands. The silver cigarette case, it is a key to a scandal, and we are close to turning the lock." The library's shadows lengthened. The fire's crackle a reminder of secrets burning to be revealed. As Poirot's little grey cells wove a net to catch the past. Chapter 10. The Midnight Confession. The library of Ashford Manor was a realm of shadows at midnight, its towering books shelves swallowed by darkness, save for the faint glow of a single candelabrum on the oak table. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, its dying embers casting flickering light across his immaculate suit. The air was heavy with the scent of aged paper and wax, and the distant howl of wind outside added a note of unease. Captain Hastings, seated in a high-backed chair, stifled a yawn, his eyes darting to the door where a soft knock had just sounded. Poirot had been summoned here by a cryptic message slipped under his door. "Library, midnight! I must speak." "See." "Mon ami," Poirot murmured, his voice a velvet whisper. "The hour is late, and secrets, they come alive in the dark. This C, I suspect, is not our Mrs. Winthrop, but another, driven by conscience or fear." His green eyes gleamed with anticipation, as he gestured for Hastings to open the door. The young maid Clara entered, her face pale beneath her cap, her hands clutching a shawl as if it were a shield. Her eyes, wide with fear, darted around the room before settling on Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I shouldn't be here, but I can't keep silent no more. It's about the cigarette case. I heard something that night." Poirot's moustache twitched, and he gestured to a chair. "Sit, Mademoiselle Clara. You are safe with Hercule Poirot. Speak, and let the truth breathe." Clara perched on the edge of the chair, her fingers twisting the shawl. I was in the hall, polishing the silver, just before the dinner ended. I heard voices, low and quick, near the study door. They were talking about the case. Said it had to be taken that night, before midnight. I didn't see who it was, but there were two of them, maybe three. I was scared, so I hid behind the curtain." Hastings leaned forward, his voice urgent. "Good heavens, Clara! A plot! Did you recognize the voices? Was it Mr. Charles, or perhaps Mr. Harrow?" Clara shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I couldn't tell, sir. They were whispering, and I was too frightened to look. One voice was deep, like a man's, but the other, it might have been a woman. They mentioned the oak grove, said something about a meeting there. I wanted to tell Lord Ashford, but I'm just a maid. If they found out I'd heard, they might—" Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing but firm. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. You have done well to come to me. This oak grove, it is mentioned in a note I found in the study. Tell me, what else did they say? Any names, any hint of why the case was to be taken?" Clara's breath hitched. "They said something about a secret inside it, something worth more than gold. One of them laughed, said it'd bring the Ashfords down. I didn't understand, but it sounded cruel, like they hated the family. I ran to the kitchen after that, didn't hear more." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind weaving connections. "A secret inside the case, you say? This aligns with the photograph, the letter, the vow. You are certain you recognized no voice? Not Monsieur Charles, Lady Beatrice, or perhaps Monsieur Harrow?" Clara's hands trembled. "I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I couldn't tell. The hall was dark and I was so scared. I've been sick with guilt, thinking if I'd spoken up, the case might still be here." Poirot studied her, noting the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes avoided his. "Mademoiselle, your fear, it is understandable, but is there more you withhold? A name, perhaps, or a suspicion you dare not voice?" Clara's gaze dropped to the floor, and a tear slipped down her cheek. I thought I heard Mr. Charles's laugh, that sharp way he has, but I can't be sure, and I don't want to accuse him wrong. He's been kind to me, given me extra for my family. If he's involved, and they find out I spoke—" Poirot's expression softened, but his mind was relentless. "You are brave to speak at all, mademoiselle. Your words, they are a lantern in the fog. Rest assured, I will protect your confidence. But tell me, this meeting in the oak grove, did they mention a time or another detail?" Clara shook her head. "Just before midnight. I didn't hear more. I'm sorry, Monsieur Poirot. I just want this to end." Poirot nodded, rising to pace the room, his steps precise. "Merci, Mademoiselle Clara. You may go, but say nothing of this to anyone. The thief, they are close, and we must tread lightly." As Clara slipped out, her footsteps fading down the hall, Hastings turned to Poirot, his voice low. "What do you make of it, Poirot? A conspiracy, right under our noses. Charles's laugh, that's damning, isn't it?" Poirot paused by the candelabrum, its light casting shadows across his face. "Damning, perhaps, but not conclusive. Clara's fear, it clouds her memory. The voices, the oak grove, the secret, these echo the note, the photograph, Victor Crane's warnings, a plot, yes, but with multiple players. Charles, with his ambition and his whispers with Beatrice, he is a thread, but not the only one." He moved to the window, gazing at the dark silhouette of the oak grove beyond. "The grove? It calls us, Hastings? The note said midnight, the oak grove, and Clara confirms it was mentioned. Tonight we will go, but with caution. The thief, they play a dangerous game, and the case, it holds a secret that could, as Clara heard, bring the Ashfords down." Hastings frowned. "You think Clara's telling the whole truth? She seemed terrified. Maybe someone's threatened her." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "She tells truth, But not all of it. Fear, it binds the tongue. The handkerchief, the cigarette stub, the letter, they point to a web of motives. Charles, Beatrice, Harrow, even the Drakes or Crane. They are pieces of a puzzle, and the oak grove, it is the next square. The library grew silent, the candlelight flickering as Poirot's little grey cells wove a net to catch a whispered conspiracy. The silver cigarette case at its heart. Chapter 11. The trap is set. The grand hall of Ashford Manor was a spectacle of opulence, its marble floors gleaming under the chandelier's golden light, its walls adorned with ancestral portraits that seemed to watch the gathered guests with silent judgment. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the room, his small frame commanding as he faced the assembly. Lord Ashford, his face taut with hope. Charles and Eleanor, their expressions a mix of defiance and unease. Lady Beatrice and Mr. Julian Harrow, their gazes guarded, Mrs. Clara Winthrop clutching her cane, and the butler, Grayson, standing stiffly by the door. Captain Hastings, positioned near a side table, watched with bated breath, knowing Poirot was about to spring a trap to catch the thief of the silver cigarette case. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "I have summoned you this evening with news most significant. The silver cigarette case, stolen 2 nights ago, has been found." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Lord Ashford stepped forward, his eyes wide. "Found? Where, Monsieur Poirot? Is it safe?" Poirot raised a hand, his smile enigmatic. "Patience, Lord Ashford. The case, it was discovered in a place most unexpected, and I shall reveal its location soon. But first, I wish to observe, how does this news affect you all?" His green eyes swept the room, sharp as a hawk's, noting every twitch, every glance. Charles Ashford's jaw tightened, his hands thrust into his pockets. "That's a relief, I suppose. But where was it? Some servant's mistake, probably." His tone was casual, but Poirot caught the flicker of his gaze toward Lady Beatrice. Beatrice laughed, a touch too bright. "How marvellous, Monsieur Poirot! I knew you'd solve it. Was it in the study all along?" Mr. Harrow's cold eyes narrowed at his wife. "Convenient, isn't it? I'd like to know who hid it and why." His voice dripped with suspicion, and Beatrice's smile faltered. Eleanor clutched her shawl, her voice barely audible. "Is it really over? The case? It's caused so much trouble." Her eyes darted to the floor, avoiding Poirot's scrutiny. Mrs. Winthrop rapped her cane on the floor. "I told you it's cursed. Found or not, it'll bring more grief, mark my words." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A curse, perhaps, Madame Winthrop, but the thief, they are human, not supernatural. The case, it was not misplaced, it was stolen with purpose. And now, I set a trap to reveal the culprit." He paused, letting the words sink in, watching as tension crackled like static among the guests. Hastings, catching Poirot's signal, stepped forward with a small box, covered in velvet. "Here it is," Hastings said, his voice steady despite his racing pulse. "Monsieur Poirot asked me to retrieve it from its hiding place." The room stilled, all eyes on the box. Poirot lifted the lid, revealing nothing. The box was empty. Gasps turned to murmurs of confusion, then accusation. Charles's face reddened. "What's this, Poirot? A trick?" "Précisément, Monsieur Charles," Poirot said, his tone calm but piercing. "A trick to draw out the guilty. The case remains missing, but your reactions, they speak volumes. The thief, they are among us, and they fear exposure." Before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the hall. A silver tray, laden with crystal glasses, lay shattered on the floor, and Grayson stood frozen, his face pale. I tripped, sir," he stammered, but Poirot's eyes locked onto him. Tripped, Monsieur Grayson? Or did you act to disrupt this moment?" Poirot moved swiftly, kneeling by the wreckage. Among the shards, he spotted a small crumpled paper, half hidden beneath a glass. He retrieved it, unfolding it to reveal a single word in a hurried scrawl, "Stop." "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, holding up the paper. "A warning, perhaps, to silence our progress. Monsieur Grayson, you were near the study that night, tasked with its security. This act of sabotage, it suggests panic. What do you know?" Grayson's composure cracked, his hands trembling. "Nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it was an accident. I know nothing of the case." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Yet you drop a tray at the precise moment of truth. The note, it is no coincidence. Speak, monsieur, or suspicion will cling to you like dust." The guests erupted, voices overlapping. Charles accused Grayson of negligence. Beatrice suggested a servant's plot. Harrow muttered about conspiracies. Eleanor shrank back, her eyes wide, while Mrs. Winthrop declared, "It's the curse, I tell you." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the chaos. "Enough! The trap, it has worked! The guilty, they betray themselves with actions, not words. This note, it echoes the one from the study, midnight, the oak grove. The thief, are desperate, and desperation, it is a beacon." He turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Observe, mon ami. Grayson's panic, Charles's quick accusations, Beatrice's deflections, they all play their parts. The note, it suggests someone here fears what the case conceals. A vow, a secret, as Clara the maid and Mrs. Winthrop have hinted." Hastings whispered, "Grayson's looking guilty, Poirot." "That crash wasn't an accident, was it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Non, Hastings. It was a distraction, but it has illuminated the path. Grayson, he knows more than he admits, but is he the thief or a pawn? The oak grove, it calls us tonight. The clues, the handkerchief, the cigarette stub, the letter, Clara's confession, they point to a conspiracy, and we are close." He addressed the room, his voice commanding. "Mesdames et messieurs, return to your rooms. The case remains lost, but not for long. Hercule Poirot sees through the shadows, and the thief, they will not escape." As the guests dispersed, their faces a gallery of fear and suspicion, Poirot lingered, holding the crumpled note. The hall's grandeur seemed to mock the chaos, its portraits bearing witness to a family unravelling. "The trap, it has stirred the hive," Poirot murmured to Hastings. "The thief, they are among these faces, and their desperation, it will be their undoing." The chandelier's light dimmed as a servant doused the candles, leaving Poirot's silhouette sharp against the darkness. His little grey cells weaving a net to ensnare a desperate culprit. Chapter 12. The Silver Truth. The grand hall of Ashford Manor shimmered under the chandelier's golden glow, its marble floors reflecting the flickering light like a polished mirror. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small stature commanding the room as if he were a conductor before an orchestra of suspects. The guests, Lord Ashford, Charles, Eleanor, Lady Beatrice Harrow, Mr. Julian Harrow, Mrs. Clara Winthrop, and the butler Grayson, sat in a semicircle of high-backed chairs, their faces a gallery of apprehension, defiance, and curiosity. Captain Hastings stood by the fireplace, his notebook tucked away, his eyes fixed on Poirot, who was about to unveil the truth behind the theft of the silver cigarette case. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant and deliberate, "the theft of the silver cigarette case has woven a web of secrets, lies, and betrayal, but Hercule Poirot, with the aid of his little grey cells, has unravelled this web. Tonight, you will know the truth, the motive, the method, and the mastermind. Lord Ashford leaned forward, his voice tight. "Monsieur Poirot, enough theatrics. Where is my case, and who took it?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Patience, Lord Ashford. The case, it is not merely an heirloom, but a key to a secret that has haunted your family for decades. Let us begin with the clues." He held up the crumpled note from the previous night's sabotage. "This note, stop, was a desperate act to halt my trap. It echoes another found in the study. The silver holds more than smoke. Midnight, the oak grove." He paced, his gloved hands gesturing. "The clues, they are many. A scratched lock, a cigarette stub with lipstick, a monogrammed handkerchief, a hidden compartment in the study, a photograph inscribed with a vow, a letter from 1893, and the maid Clara's confession of a plot. Each points to a truth. But first, the method." Poirot turned to the display cabinet, brought into the hall for this moment. The cabinet was locked, the key with Lord Ashford, yet the case was taken without force. How? The lock was manipulated, not picked, but opened with a duplicate key crafted in advance. The scratch, it was a deliberate misdirection to suggest an amateur's hand. Charles Ashford scoffed, his arms crossed. A duplicate key? Preposterous! Who had the means to make one? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A good question, Monsieur Charles. Let us consider motive. The case, it is not just silver. Mrs. Winthrop spoke of a curse, a vow from 1892, tied to a Russian prince. The letter, signed V, warned of ruin if the case's secret was not guarded. The photograph confirmed it, a pact, a scandal, perhaps a contract that could ruin the Ashfords or their rivals, the Drakes." Eleanor gasped, her hands clutching her shawl. "The Drakes? You think they stole it?" Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, mademoiselle. The Drakes, they are a shadow, but the thief is closer. Victor Crane, the scarred stranger, knew of the case's importance. He warned you, Eleanor, to unsettle the family, but his alibi holds. He was in London. No, the thief is among us." He turned to Lady Beatrice, whose smile was strained. "Madame Harrow, your scarf carried ash, and the cigarette stub suggested a woman. But the lipstick, it was not yours. A clever plant. Your flirtations with Charles, they were a distraction, oui?" Beatrice's eyes widened. "I've done nothing, Monsieur Poirot. I'm no thief." Poirot's gaze shifted to Mr. Harrow. "And you, monsieur, your jealousy burned, but you did not act. Your meeting in the oak grove, seen by old Tom, was not with a thief, but a business rival, discussing matters unrelated, yet it gave you opportunity." Harrow's face reddened. "This is absurd. I was at the card table." "Précisément," Poirot said, turning to Grayson. "And you, Monsieur Grayson, you dropped the tray last night, leaving a note to stop my trap. You were near the study, tasked with its security. Why such panic?" Grayson paled, stammering, "I told you, it was an accident." Poirot's voice sharpened. "Non, monsieur, it was no accident. You are the thief." The room erupted in gasps, but Poirot pressed on. "You had access to the study, the means to make a duplicate key. The maid, Clara, overheard a plot, your voice, deep and commanding, with another. But you were not alone." He turned to Charles. "Monsieur Charles, your ambition to modernize the Ashford business clashed with your father's traditions. The case, it held a document, a contract from 1892, proving your grandfather cheated the Drakes. You sought it to destroy it, to protect your plans." Charles leapt to his feet. "That's a lie! I'd never—" Poirot cut him off, holding up a small gleaming object, the silver cigarette case, retrieved from his pocket. "This, mes amis, was found in the oak grove, hidden in a hollow tree. The thief placed it there, intending to retrieve it later. But Grayson, you were betrayed by your accomplice. He pressed a hidden catch on the case, revealing a compartment. Inside was a folded paper, its ink faded but legible, a coded contract naming the Ashfords and Drakes. It proves a fraud that enriched the Ashfords. Grayson, you were bribed by the Drakes to steal it, but Charles, you learned of the plan and joined, hoping to secure your future. Grayson collapsed into his chair, his face ashen. I had no choice. The Drakes threatened my family. Charles promised to help, said we'd destroy the contract. Charles's defiance crumbled. I only wanted to protect the family name. Lord Ashford's voice was a roar. Charles, how could you? Poirot's gaze softened. The heart, it leads us astray. Grayson, you acted under duress. Charles, from ambition. The case is returned, but the truth, it is its own justice. The hall fell silent, the chandelier's light casting long shadows as the guests absorbed the revelation. Eleanor wept softly. Beatrice clutched Harrow's arm, and Mrs. Winthrop muttered about curses fulfilled. Poirot stood, his silhouette a beacon of truth, the silver cigarette case gleaming in his hand. Hastings, he murmured as the guests dispersed. The case, it held a secret worth stealing, but the human heart, it is the true riddle. Chapter 13. The case closed. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Ashford Manor's morning room, casting a soft golden glow over the polished mahogany table where Hercule Poirot sat, sipping a tisane with his characteristic precision. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of lavender from the gardens, a stark contrast to the storm of revelations that had shaken the manor the previous night. Captain Hastings, seated opposite, scribbled notes in his journal, his face a mixture of awe and exhaustion after Poirot's dramatic denouement in the Grand Hall. The silver cigarette case, now safely returned to Lord Ashford, lay on the table, its filigree gleaming as if mocking the turmoil it had caused. Mon ami, Poirot said, his green eyes twinkling, you write as if to capture the soul of the case. But the soul, it is in the human heart, its ambitions, its fears, its betrayals. The case is closed, yet there are threads to tie, no? Hastings closed his journal, leaning forward. Poirot, you were brilliant last night. Grayson and Charles, working together, bribed by the Drakes. But there are still things I don't quite follow. How did you know the case was in the oak grove? Poirot's moustache curved in a satisfied smile. The little grey cells, Hastings. They weave the clues into a tapestry. The note from the study, midnight, the oak grove. It was a beacon. Clara's confession confirmed a meeting there, and old Tom's shadowy figure pointed the way. I searched the grove before the gathering, finding the case in a hollow tree, just as the thief intended to retrieve it later. The coded contract inside, it was the prize, a proof of fraud that could ruin the Ashfords. Hastings frowned. But Grayson, why did he agree to it? And Charles, how did he get involved? Poirot set down his cup, his voice measured. Grayson, he was a pawn, coerced by the Drakes' threats to his family. A butler, loyal yet vulnerable, he had access to the study and the skill to craft a duplicate key. The scratch on the lock, it was his error, a sign of haste. Charles, however, was driven by ambition. He learned of Grayson's plan, perhaps through an overheard whisper, as Clara heard, and saw a chance to destroy the contract, securing his vision for the Ashford business. Their alliance was fragile, each betraying the other in their panic. He gestured to the cigarette case. The case itself, it was a vessel for truth. The hidden compartment, revealed by a catch, held the contract from 1892, proving the Ashfords' grandfather cheated the Drakes. This vow, as the photograph and letter suggested, was a pact to conceal the fraud. The Drakes, seeking revenge, bribed Grayson to retrieve it, but Charles's involvement complicated their plan. Hastings nodded, then hesitated. What about the other clues? The cigarette stub, the handkerchief with Beatrice's initials. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The stub, with its lipstick, was a misdirection, planted by Grayson to suggest a woman, perhaps to cast suspicion on Lady Beatrice, whose flirtations with Charles were a convenient distraction. The handkerchief, monogrammed B.H., was another false trail, likely dropped by Charles to muddy the waters. Beatrice and Harrow, they were entangled in their own drama, but not the theft. Eleanor's fear, it stemmed from the stranger, Victor Crane, who knew of the case's significance, but was not the thief. His role was to unsettle, not to steal. Hastings whistled softly. And Mrs. Winthrop's curse. Just superstition, then. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Superstition, perhaps, but it gave voice to a truth. The case's history, its tie to a scandal, made it a curse in the minds of those who knew. Mrs. Winthrop's letter, hidden in the book, confirmed the stakes. The Drakes, they were the shadow behind the crime, but Grayson and Charles, they were the hands. The door opened, and Lord Ashford entered, his face weary but relieved. Monsieur Poirot, I cannot thank you enough. The case is back, the contract secured. But Charles, my own son, what now? Poirot rose, his tone gentle. Lord Ashford, the heart of a son is complex. Charles acted to protect your legacy, though misguided. He has confessed, and the Drake's plot is exposed. The contract, I suggest you destroy it, to end this cycle of vengeance. As for Grayson, his coercion merits leniency, but justice must be served. The law, it will decide. Ashford nodded, his eyes heavy. And Eleanor? She's distraught, blaming herself for not speaking sooner about Crane. Mademoiselle Eleanor, she is brave, Poirot said. Her silence was fear, not guilt. She will heal with time. Your family, it will endure, for you are stronger than the secrets that bind you. As Ashford left, Hastings turned to Poirot. What about Crane? Will he face consequences? Poirot shrugged. Crane, he played a peripheral role, stirring fear but not stealing. The Drakes, they will face scrutiny, but that is for others to pursue. Our task, it is complete. The room grew quiet, the sunlight warming the air. Poirot gazed at the cigarette case, his fingers tracing its filigree. The human heart, Hastings, it seeks to guard its treasures, love, ambition, honour. Yet it is these that lead to betrayal. This case, it was a mirror, reflecting the flaws of those who coveted it. Hastings grinned. You're waxing philosophical, Poirot. What's next? A holiday, perhaps? Poirot's eyes twinkled. A holiday? Non, mon ami. The world, it is full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot, he is never idle. Even now, a letter awaits, a new mystery, perhaps, in London. He patted his pocket, where a sealed envelope peeked out, its postmark foreign and intriguing. As they stepped into the hall, the manor seemed lighter, its shadows dispelled by truth. Poirot paused by a window, gazing at the gardens where the oak grove stood silent. The case is closed, Hastings, but the mind, it is always open, ready for the next adventure. The sound of a carriage crunching on gravel signalled their departure, and Poirot's silhouette, sharp against the morning light, hinted at mysteries yet to come.